everybody, and welcome once again to the Road to the Procure Tech Cup. Very happy to have you here this morning. I'm going to be joined by the ConvergentIS team to help you discover how to build a business case for source-to-pay suites or end-to-end procurement platforms, and we'll get into the nuances of what that means in just a second here. So thanks for joining. This is the show for procurement professionals to learn about the art of the possible with procurement technology on autopilot. So let's get straight into it. Before we get into the content here, a little bit of housekeeping. The journey continues for the Road to the Procure Tech Cup. So this season, we're going less into demos and more into how can you be successful with procurement technology. So all the topics that are required to build a business case, to architecture your solution properly, to deploy it properly, to make a change management plan, to put governance in place, all the things that can trip you up on the way to the benefits of implementing this type of technology is what we're covering this week. And we've got 8 solution providers that are accompanying us on this journey. And today we're talking about source-to-pay suites and end-to-end procurement platforms with ConvergentIS and how to build a business case. And everything will culminate in April when we have a virtual conference and you can actually participate in the conversations versus it being a one-way discussion to you here. So just quickly, the agenda. What is a source-to-pay suite or an end-to-end procurement platform? I told you we'd get into the nuances, so we'll do that first so we all level set on the definition. Then we'll get ConvergentIS to give us an overview of who they are and why they're qualified to talk to us about this topic. And then we'll get into the meat of the discussion. How should you think about building that business case for your suite or your end-to-end procurement platform? So let's look at the overview of what a source-to-pay process is in different contexts. What are the business value case or value levers for a business case? And a little bit of a case study to illustrate how to use those. So without further ado, before getting into the slides here, let me bring on Deep and Sean. How are you guys doing, my friends?
Good afternoon, good morning. Great to be here, Joel.
And
Good
you're right.
Friday.
Yeah, you're right to say that, Sean, right? Because people tune in from all over the world for this thing, which always surprises me. But yeah, thanks for being here, Deep. Sean, would you mind just introducing yourselves quickly so folks know who they're dealing with here?
Deep, please start.
For sure. Hello, everyone. Again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and also good Friday. I'm Deep Bhandari. I've got around 20 years of experience in SAP technologies with around a decade at SAP and now more than a decade in ConvergentIS, building procurement and supply chain solutions. Sean.
Yeah, Deep. Love getting to work with you as I know the feeling's mutual after this long. And what I love too is getting to go and help companies unlock potential. And this is really what it's all about, right? There's so much potential in supply chain. And so I call it the never-ending climb, right? Build a better you so you can show up better for the world and leave the world better than you found it. And this is what Rio and the whole topic we're going to talk about today, because building a stronger supply chain ultimately creates the kind of business resilience that we're looking for. And we're pretty passionate about that. But you know that already, Joel. Just sharing that for everybody out there.
Yeah, and you didn't mention your role, but I'll mention it just for people's benefit. Chief Executive Officer at ConvergentIS, right? So you're saying that from the top of the company, which sets the tone for everybody else, which is great. And so I'm really happy to have you guys on board here today for the show. So just before we get into the actual content of how to build the business case, I promised we'd talk about definitions, which I've put both of them, right? Source-to-pay suites and end-to-end platforms in the same spot here, where traditionally in that yellow circle, those are the traditional modules you have in a source-to-pay suite: spend analysis, category management, sourcing, contract management, which is your strategic procurement suite, and then operational purchasing or procure to pay, and accounts payable, which is more your operational purchasing, right? And stuff your shared services or your frontline buyers are doing. I should have also circled supplier relationship management, actually, because that also shows up usually in suites. But I've put in blue like intake and orchestration, because what I'm starting to see, and I don't know if you guys see that as well, is that we have this other solution category that's developed in these past couple of years, but I'm starting to see what I call the great convergence, right? So these source-to-pay suite providers are starting to bring out intake management and process orchestration modules. And the folks that led off the charge with process orchestration and intake management are starting to develop functionality and modules around the functional sub processes within procurement. So that's how I'm defining it. That's what I'm seeing in the next 6 to 18 months. But I'd love your take on, is that the right definition, the right way to think about it, and or are you seeing the same thing?
All right, number one, I'm giving you a full 9 out of 10 for the dad joke there on the convergence. Joel, love what you did there. What I would add is the opportunity to consider a full end-to-end package that tries to be a unicorn for everybody and be everything that you ever needed. Um, in enterprise software, this is very, very difficult. So what I encourage people to consider is that what used to be standard was you bought one suite has been replaced, and some of the leading minds in the industry have agreed with this, that you replace this instead with the spine of what you are looking to get done. And then you can swap in the best of breed so that if you want this module for procure to pay, and then let's say Alan and the amazing work that they're doing to go and handle advanced sourcing. Well, great, you can have that sourcing tool next to another sourcing tool for a different category, next to a third or fourth sourcing tool that is absolutely best in class for that category. And for some organizations, that's genuinely what they need.
Yeah, and it's a great point. And I would add the time dimension to that, right? Like, gone are the days where it makes sense to, make an investment in procurement technology for 10, 15 years, right? I think
Yeah.
the business environment is moving much faster, right? We're seeing, the T word, and we're seeing COVID hit, and we're seeing all these risk dimensions take a lot more room in our supply chain. And so I may want a leading edge sourcing tool for a couple months or years based on the dynamic I'm facing. But maybe we have M&A, maybe we switch our business strategy, maybe the market changes, and now a value lever emerges in another functional domain within procurement. And I would rather, take that out and put something else in, right? And so I need to think about my backbone in a way that's going to allow me to do that over time in a much more nimble fashion than we've been used to.
Nimble 100%. You need the agility because the world changes. And if the best practice does not change and the software that you bought cannot adapt, then that's going to leave you behind all the organizations that have that kind of agility.
Yeah, and one last point, and then we'll get to the discussion around the business case. But I think it's also one thing I've realized over time is that most procurement organizations only have, at any one time, one or two bullets in their procure tech gun, so to speak, right? So they can only go up to the executive leadership and secure funding. They can't do that 7, 8, 9 times for different solutions. You need to sell a vision, and then you've got one or two tries to do that. So why not get a platform, an end-to-end platform, where you're going to be able to get that flexibility that you need, right? Like little mini cap gun bullets, right? To get you to that next full bullet that you could put in your gun 3, 5
Yeah.
years down the line, right?
The bite-sized, right?
That's right.
You
That's right.
don't have to try to bite it all off with some giant rip and replace, because I don't know too many CFOs that want to try to bite that kind of an elephant all in one go.
No, absolutely. Especially given those digital transformation failure rates that keep being stable around 70 to 90%. So, all right, I think we've spent enough time on definitions, and we've already gotten into the meat of a really interesting topic there with the convergence. But tell me, Deep, right? Who's ConvergentIS? Why should folks be paying attention to this discussion here?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So at ConvergentIS, we help SAP run enterprises, eliminate fragmentation across source to pay by installing Rio, which is an orchestration and automation layer that lives natively inside SAP. And with over 600 plus years of combined SAP delivery experience and a gold partnership status, we simplify procurement with one unified experience, real-time data, and no duplicated master data. And what we have seen when deploying the orchestration engine is that customer achieve faster adoption, cleaner integration, and measurable business outcomes, and all without leaving SAP. And I would definitely add one thing, that whatever we do at ConvergentIS, we do with passion and with resilience. So that will be a hallmark for us.
That's great. Yeah, and I think you with that presentation, you kind of add another dimension that we haven't spoken about so far, which is when you're considering these suites and these platforms, also considering like what you're going to plug into in the back end and what your ERP is and what the data structures are is another dimension or consideration, right? Because I think you guys, one of your hallmarks is that, to your point, deep, right? You're really deep on SAP data structures, SAP business processes. And so your solution takes everything we've discussed so far, but pushes it much further in that context as well, right?
That's
Yeah,
absolutely right. Yeah.
that's our unfair advantage, Joel. I mean, we install natively inside ECC and S4 in a way that I haven't met anyone else that does.
Very cool. All right. So last year, a lot of people loved the demos. We're trying to try something a bit different this year, but I do not want to take the demos away from you, right? So if, as we're going through this, you go, it makes sense to take a look at ConvergentIS. Here's a QR code that you can either come back to in the recording, or you can scan now and get your private ConvergentIS demo and ask all those questions and see the principles we're talking about in action. But given the time constraint, just want to make sure that we're being sensitive about that, doing demos only when it adds to the conversation in the show. So on that note, how do you build a business case for source to pay suites, right? So Deep, I'll hand it off to you just to talk to us about the variability that source to pay can mean from a process perspective for different organizations.
For sure, Joel. And definitely, I will also basically look into one of the questions that most of the procurement team in enterprise today are looking for answer is, should we chase an end-to-end source to pay platform or fix one problem at a time with best of the breed? And each path has a trade-off. Like as source to pay and procurement team, like platform offers consistency and visibility, while point solution brings quick wins, but often create integration that later. And today, as we were speaking about, with so much changes happening so quickly, economically and politically and globally, today isn't about features. It's all about integration value. How much efficiency, visibility, and control do you gain or lose based on how connected your systems are? And when you have to make a decision between an end-to-end source to pay platform or a best of the breed, the good news is you don't have to choose one side right away. Most teams today starts by connecting what they already have, and that's where intake and orchestrations comes in. And we will be using Rio as an example for how that works across maybe a procurement system, and your procurement system can be SAP system, it can be Ariba, or maybe a third-party systems. So if we just look into even inside the same enterprises, and the source to pay really looks across the different categories, right? So if you can move to the next slide, Joel, in which I will just show how the source to pay typically looks like inside an enterprise. And if you look here, the indirect procurement in an enterprise uses guided buying and catalogs. The direct procurement revolves around BOMs, MRP, and contract manufacturing. And similarly, services rely on statement of work orders, and proof of service. And each follow a different process, system, and a set of stakeholders. And that's what creates complexity. So orchestration engine like us brings these three streams together, like different processes, different systems, and these different set of stakeholders. So just to give an example, whether it's an MRO part ordered through guided buying, a component managed through supplier inventory, or a consultant working on time and material contract, orchestration engine manages the same intake, approval, sourcing, and fulfillment logic behind the scene. So orchestration engine like Rio, it's not another silo. It sits above the process as an intelligent layer that unifies and automates execution regardless of where the transaction originates. So just to give an example, you might have a sourcing event happening on Ariba or maybe in Ivolva. What orchestration engine like us can do, they can basically trigger an event and bring all those events together to show on one unified experience to the end user. So again, it's not in silo, but it's an intelligent layer that unifies and automates execution wherever the transaction is originating.
Very
So any
cool.
questions on that?
And for those that don't know what Rio means, would you enlighten us? I know it's the guy's name, but I'd love to know what the acronym stands for, if anything.
For sure. Yeah. So RIO means responsive intake and orchestration. That's an acronym, but it's a personified acronym. So RIO is really an intern that can basically learn with your organization and can become an adult, or maybe I will say a senior consultant over a period of time. So it's really a native AI solution which learns as you feed in more data with it.
Very cool. And I think this will also, it gives the other dimension to what we were putting in the slide up front, right? Around, yes, I try to conceptualize it with a market map, but you need to think about how does that market map apply, or how does that process apply to every single category that we're looking at, right? So I think that's a really important thing to think about when you think about the source to pay process end to end and how different it is by category. I'd love for you to chat about, how we should think about building a business case in that context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So, and Joel, what we have seen while working with all customers share the same goals. They all want faster cycle times. They all want better automation and one connected system. But what holds them back are the manual steps, the fragmented data, and slow and inconsistent processes. And this is where the orchestration engine like us bridges that gap, like connecting the systems, automating the manual work, and giving users one seamless experience inside SAP. And again, coming back to the question that any procurement team is asking, should we go for a platform approach or should we go for a best of the breed? In the platform approach, we have to also be careful that it's not only the business stakeholders that are coming in, it's also the IT stakeholders that are coming in. So, and whenever the IT stakeholders comes, they have got different sets of objectives and different sets of, I will say, enterprise ready features that they need from the platform perspective. And to create a business model around that, and when the new stakeholders are coming in, we recommend that we also, if you have got 3 use cases to solve as a business use case when you're going for a platform approach, it's always, I will say, the quick win is to start with one first use case, which has a bigger impact rather than just going through all these 3 use cases. So in a platform approach, because your stakeholders are increasing, it's always better to start with one use case and basically bite the whole cake in a very bite size.
Yeah, and to that point, right? Because we've been discussing on the show past weeks, like how to build a business case for a sourcing tool or for spend analysis or any of the other verticals that we saw in that market map. And I think you highlighted it, but one of the big value propositions, or one of the from an orchestration layer or a full end-to-end platform, is that integration is native, right? So how do you think, is that the biggest difference, or are there any other differences in terms of how you go about building a business case for an end-to-end platform versus specific category solutions?
Sean, probably you can answer that question.
Yeah, I think it's the difference between how do we make sure things are going to be running and flowing the way that we want, Rio being, Portuguese for river, that kind of flow, that kind of smooth execution. And there's also a contrast that I would invite folks to think about. There's a key differentiation between some orchestration tools that are good at, or intake and orchestration that can track things that need to be done, kind of like ticketing, versus some that will go and execute the work. And so I would invite everybody to really deeply consider that, because those are very different business cases. So what I would like to ask folks to consider is think about what needs to be true for the business case to execute the work, right? So there's all of the lean engineering practices and principles that you can apply to find the confusion, waste, and delay in that process. Now surface that. That's really what we're after. And to the extent that you're looking at a point solution like sourcing, some sourcing tools are amazing at services, some sourcing tools are amazing at transportation. And depending on what you are targeting, which bite-sized start you're going after, where are the dollars? Follow those dollars. Now, the next thing that you want to consider is what are the ingredients for making sure that you're capturing and executing the work in a coherent way as it flows through the process. So as it flows through, make sure that you get to three-way match. By the way, I know there's some beautiful agents out there. I know Rio has so much of that same capability, but please, I would implore you, do not put an agent on three-way matching. That is a process that we need to make sure is still handled with deterministic logic for the 5 6 sigma level of reliability at scale.
Yeah.
And the reliability and trust comes back to roost in the business case. Because when you're validating, is it true? And this kind of gets to the next slide. We have to be able to trust not just that the execution is going to work with enterprise grade reliability, but we have to trust that the business case and the ROI is trusted.
Yeah, and you make a great point, right, about like just slapping AI agents. That could be a whole other show, right? Just slapping.
There's all
Yeah.
afternoon there, Joel.
Yeah, non-deterministic or statistical solutions to problems that require 100% certain math, right?
Yeah.
And so I've harped on that a couple times, but I love the fact of saying, like, essentially what I'm taking away from building a business case for a best of breed sourcing tool is like, can I build a business case in a box, so to speak, or do I really need the whole end-to-end process to work for my business case to work, right? And that's where the end-to-end vision comes in, right? And then what assumptions and what capabilities do you need to be true for that business case to be true? So I love that way to think about it. All right, and I know, Sean, you also wanted to talk about kind of the soft side of building a business case, right?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of how automated we get, it's people, then process, then technology. And the people part is where your business case is either won or lost. So talk about socialize early. You and I both 100% on the same page. If you go into a steering committee meeting or a budget committee meeting and you don't already know and you have not already gained the agreement from every single leader at that table, you're going to get a no because you haven't done the work to get everybody's heads nodding before that meeting ever happened. And that socialization is really important. But this is the validating, is this aligned with the business objectives within the organization? Is this a trusted set of return on investment, or is this really squishy, right? If your team right now is in a mode where you need hard cost savings, then your business case better be mainly made up of hard cost savings. And there's a lot of, I'll just call it economic and geopolitical factors that are driving a lot of organizations to look for hard cost savings right now. There's other organizations where it's the soft savings of accelerating the time to value and reducing or eliminating as much of that complexity and confusion and delay and waste in just navigating all of the internal approvals and due diligence around procurement. Either of those can be true, but it's either soft costs or hard costs. And that needs to align with the organizational priorities. And whatever those numbers are, you've got to have it within like plus minus 10, 20%, so that everybody at that table trusts the return on investment that they're going to get. And they trust you as the leader asking for the money, that you're going to be a good steward of it, and that you've got a credible plan and a credible partner that they can trust, because nobody wants to be this CFO that's out there right now saying, yeah, we're going to throw $25 million at this and hope we get 100. Right now, the appetite, and I see this consistently, is listen, we can put maybe a few $1 million at this problem, but we better be saving 10 or more. And that's really the validity, the trust, and the path to go and socialize and validate the case, the problem, and get all of those heads nodding before the business case even comes up in that meeting.
Yeah, and I love that, right? Like, it's not 70% of the stakeholders, it's not 80% of the stakeholders, it's every single one of the stakeholders that are going to be in that meeting, because as we've been discussing, like there's a lot of nuance, right? Like even before we got on the call, Sean, you mentioned the post that I put out this morning around like, what are the architectural implications of a legacy source to pay suite that's been built by acquisition versus one of these newer gen platforms that's been built natively to orchestrate, right? And that'll have implications on your numbers, implications on your assumptions. And this is stuff that you need to communicate to these stakeholders, executive stakeholders, before they can say yes, or to get them comfortable with the numbers of your business case. And that cannot be done in a 5, 6, 7, 8 person meeting, where they need a decision right off the bat, right? Like if there's any doubt whatsoever for anybody, everybody's going to rally around the no until that person's doubt is eradicated, right? So I love you pointing to that as being kind of the last step before you can hope to get something off the ground. And the last point I'll make is around the vision, right? Having that vision as well, that you're not just doing one step, right? But you've got IT on your side in terms of how it helps them achieve their objectives, and you've aligned with that. And if there's an exception to guiding principles around the fact that, you only want to buy one solution, but you're going for two, well, they need to be clear on the why behind the business value for that as well. And it's not just procurement being trying to be different or unique.
Absolutely. I love it.
Yeah.
Great. And as we wrap up here as well, like I know you wanted to discuss kind of a case study of what this could look like when we think about end-to-end procurement platforms.
Yeah, for sure.
Deep, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So like in the last slide, we talk about the alignment. And this slide is to bring the clarity. So alignment and clarity are the two key words when you're deciding for the source to pay platform or a best of the breed. And when we talk about the clarity should be how to prove the dollar value. And in this slide, one of our customer was facing the same challenges as we are discussing on this call, as many teams see in their source to pay processes, like too many manual invoices, slow intake processes, and limited visibility across systems. And frankly speaking, nothing is completely broken, but everything is too manual, too slow, and too scattered. And this is the same thing that is happening in this case study with our customer. And we started with asking a simple question. What if we could save 5 minutes per invoice? And that become the first step in our business case methodology, and that is to define the scope and the baseline. We mapped their current invoices, measured how long each step took, and calculated the cost per transactions. And next, we identified the improvement levers, the areas where Rio could orchestrate or automate, or any orchestration engine can basically orchestrate and automate, and then we quantified the impact. And if you see on the left-hand side of the slide, just saving 5 minutes across 1 million invoices at $50 per hour translated to around 4.2 million in annual personal saving. And that was just a bottom-up value layer, right? Efficiency and cost saving. What we also look into our business model methodology is a top-down value layer. Like how can orchestration engine like us improves purchasing performance? So if I look into this example on the right side, our customer had an annual procurement spend of $5 billion. And we also modeled additional value to that spend. So $5 million was just in the opportunity cost by purchasing faster during the price reductions. And we could find an extra 2 million from reduced off-contract leakage through a single intake process. And if you add additional early payment discounts, better visibility, and improved decision making, all combined, that delivered around $11.2 million of total annual benefits. And when we talk about these benefits, it's not only the opportunity cost value, right? They were measurable, auditable, and directly tied to the orchestration engine automation capabilities. So when we talk about proving the value, it's not hypothetical. It's built on the real data and validated by finance, and then directly connected to the orchestration engine like Rio ability to reduce manual effort, drive compliant and efficient procurement. So that's just a case study that we want to show how we drive to a business case and what's the methodology that we use.
And I love that. Like, one thing I want to call out is, in that invoicing example where you say we saved personnel costs, like, you have the choice of either, in something like AP, maybe you're using contractual services to get that done. So it is a hard saving. But in other cases, maybe it's employees, and it's about redeploying that effort to more value add activities, right? So the other piece of the business case that you can bring to the show is, what are we not doing today that we could be doing if we had more time or effort that would generate value for the business, right? And so I think it's important to think about it that way as well. Sean,
Yeah,
anything to add?
The one thing that I'd add is we're very, very fortunate to have such a powerful invoice automation capability within Rio, because it means that we're able to catch and intercept and work through all of those payments and help with what we call ERS Plus and a whole bunch of other capability there. And then the invoice flip, things like that. But then when we pair that with the intake, we create the perfect continuous improvement cycle where we're catching the intake and we're dealing with the invoices. And that continuous learning cycle means that we can create the hard savings very, very quickly within 6-8 weeks, and then pair that with the intake to continuously tune, upgrade, and improve in bite-sized pieces. And that's been feedback that we've received as a very, very powerful combination.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one last question. I know we're already at time here, but I think this is important, which is, how do you think about, so this is a business case. I think there's potential for making this business case very interesting from a return standpoint, but how do you think about connecting the business case to, like, and we'll get into this further in the season, but like my project scope, right? How I want to actually deliver on that business case over time?
Yeah, all bite-sized, Joel. So, you typically have an opportunity to go and say, maybe you've got 9 different accounts payable centers, like one of our customers did. Well, great, let's get those collapsed down to 2. That's not something you do over 6 weeks. That's something you do over several months, right? So as you accomplish that, there's hard cost savings that funds the next piece, right? So you're able to go take costs right out of the business, and that creates momentum and win and success internally, and success begets success, right? That creates and reinforces the internal credibility that you as the leader need to go in and build that next step. Sometimes that means if you're in procurement and you have a partner in accounts payable, that means that you are collaborating across your team in a really, really cross departmental, powerful way. And that's one of the things that I know CFOs absolutely love to see, because it means that people get it, they want to make it better, and they've got a credible plan.
And it's thought of end to end, right? And it's also like the way I'd illustrate what you're saying is like a hockey stick, right? Where maybe I'm bite sizing at the beginning, but that allows me to generate some cost savings, self fund the next step, and then get me to a point where my solution is mature enough to deploy at scale, and then poof, the benefits become much more interesting. But I've taken
You
the
got it.
time to put that foundation in place, right?
Exactly.
Very cool. All right, so recap here quickly. I know you guys watching the show that I've got you. I'm taking you for more than 30 minutes here. So one, the convergence is underway. So source to pay suites are deploying intake and orchestration functionality, and on the other side, I'm seeing intake and orchestration deploying more source to pay module and traditional source to pay functionality. So I think in the next 6 to 18 months, like, that's going to become one category, and you'll have legacy providers and next gen providers within that category. Second, source to pay means different things to you based on your strategy, your industry, your spend profile. I think Deep gave us a really good understanding of what that means, your different categories. And so when you think about the end-to-end source to pay process, you need to decompose that down into your categories and your spend. Where's the big amounts of spend? And so you'll need different processes to address those different types of spend. And the third thing, the promise of an end-to-end platform and the business case are two different things, right? So long-term vision, but also, as we've just been discussing, what's the minimal viable scope for different projects within a vision, within a program, because you want to avoid having too many assumptions, too many variables, too much risk to a transformation like this, which should be more of like going to the gym instead of plastic surgery, in and out, and I'm beautiful. All right. And so, so that, just to wrap up the show, if you want to keep going on the journey of the Procure Tech Cup with me, you're not already reading the newsletter, I've got a QR code for you here on the left-hand side. And ConvergentIS, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And I'd love for you to leave us off with, I think, an asset that is interesting in this contest for folks as well, right?
Yeah, just a quick asset available for download. When you're trying to put together your own business case, it always helps to have something that you can edit instead of needing to start from scratch. So we've provided that there. Quick link, and we're happy to send that over for you.
Very cool. So QR codes are available. Thank you so much again for tuning in this week on the road to the Procure Tech Cup. We'll see you again next week, where we're having a discussion with veneering, kind of coming at the same problem from the other direction, from intake and orchestration. So tune in to see how to build business cases in that context. Deep, Sean, thanks again for being here. We'll see everybody again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Deep.